The controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space.
Is there a correlation between any of the characteristics of these UAPs, UFOs?
What we tend to see are the smaller vehicles tend to be, think of a sports car. The large ones tend to be not always, but almost exclusively either triangular shape or boomerang shape.
Werewolves? I see dead people walking around like regular people. They don't see each other. They only see what they want to see. They don't know they're dead.
The UFO, UAP community was fairly surprised. Shocked might be a better word.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human.
Do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
I've seen a flying saucer.
You've seen one?
Yes, definitely. At Lane Cove.
When was this?
1953.
You don't think this is a figment of your imagination?
Several other people with me saw it.
I'm not wishing that all that stay with me.
There is now a new UFO whistleblower with some major bombshell level statements.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This episode is brought to you by some amazing people. Tabin Rice, Eddie Tabb, Kelly Lewis, Mecca Mickey, Diane Boss, Jeanette Angel, and Dorothy Hawkins. And a special thank you to all the subscribers on YouTube and the followers on Spotify. If you wish to support the podcast on YouTube, you can hit that join button below to become an Eyes to That Sky member. Or if you want to join the Patreon or provide other support, the links are below in the show description. But now, on with the show. Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, where we explore the unexplained and mysterious phenomena that have occurred throughout the state of Michigan and beyond.
From UFO sightings to ghostly encounters, we delve deep into the stories, the evidence, and the theories behind these strange events.
We are your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Wayne.
We are an educator duo that after an encounter with a triangular UFO in 2018 in Michigan, we decided to investigate UFOs and the paranormal. In this podcast, we will be speaking with eyewitnesses, experts, and researchers to uncover the truth about some of the most intriguing cases of paranormal activity in and around Michigan.
Our goal is not to convince anyone of the existence of these phenomena, but rather to provide a platform for discussion and exploration. So, buckle up and join us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole.
On an escalator.
Okay, hey everyone, how is it going out there?
Hello, everybody.
We are coming to you from Southeast Michigan within the shadow of the great Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. And we are down in the bunker tonight. And we want to thank you for joining us on this episode, a very special episode, Michelle. It is the what?
Oh my God, it's the 100th.
It's the 100th episode.
We have hit triple digits.
We have. I feel accomplished now. But it is Sunday, August 18th, 2024. And the summer is winding down while we get wound up, because that means school starts here very soon and we're back to work tomorrow.
I think I've worked myself up into a tizzy. My stomach is not feeling so hot tonight. So
yep.
Yeah. So
she's the talking avatar.
I'm gonna save some bandwidth on this interview. And just thank everyone who came out to the meet and greet. We had a great time. I got a chance to see a couple of my former students. They came out.
Absolutely.
We hung out with Tabin and one of our newer members, Robin, for pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was a great time. Met some new faces, and it was really cool to have people come out and hang out with us in our little hidden away town, I guess you could say here.
Especially as we get closer to going back to school, because once we get on that schedule, boy, our weeks are pretty much done. And the first 2 weeks of school, anyone who's listening that's a teacher, the first 2 weeks, you literally drag in the door. You do not cook. There is no house cleaning the first 2 weeks. You are in survival mode of storing up whatever energy you can just to drive home.
It's like the kids, right? The first couple of weeks of school, them coming in, especially like first hour kids, they are dragging and they are just struggling for a couple of weeks till they get used to it. And and teachers, we're used to it, but when we get home, that's when it's all over. It's like, what are we ordering? Okay, I ate, I'm going to bed. Have a nice,
or what can go in the air
day.
fryer.
Yeah
Right.
We need a bigger air fryer.
So, but no, I see in chat, Taban mentioned about loved hearing Robin's story.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the closer it gets to home, on one of our future episodes, possibly next week, we're going to put it to, put it to words and bring Robin's story to the show as well.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of the meet and greet and meeting some new people, there we go. We have Dick and Fern.
It's Fern Harrison.
Fern. Yep. They join the podcast. So, hey, yeah, thanks for coming out, and hopefully you enjoy the show tonight. It's going to be a very special, intense show. So.
And Dick and Fern, I will tell you that I relayed the message to my older brother, and he told me to tell you that he said hello and that you were two very fine people. So he had very fond memories.
Yep. All right, so let's see. One of the first things we want to say is if you would like to email the show, remember you can do that. And our email is mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com. Send us your stories, paranormal encounters, UFO encounters, cryptids, whatever, ghost stories. If you want them saved for all eternity, or at least as long as the podcasting sphere still continues and everything else, we will put it out there for you. So, all right, what else do we got? Oh, if you wish to make a donation to the podcast, you can do so with PayPal, Super Chats, buy us a coffee, check out our merchandise store. You can join the Patreon. All of those links can be found below in the show description. Now, Michelle, do you want to tell them about shadow banning? Or do you want me to do it?
Oh, God, YouTube. Anytime you say alien, paranormal, cryptid,
alternative
history, conspiracy theory, then YouTube decides that it likes to shadow ban. So when we say like, share, and subscribe, we are not joking. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies.
Yeah, right. But one of the things that you guys can do to help us fight this shadow banning thing is, when I looked at the analytics, again, 65.1% of you watching this are not subscribed. Just hit that subscribe button. It's free. It helps us grow the show, and it keeps us motivated, and we can get bigger guests on. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. All of that is really needed.
Although it was funny. I mean, the show is getting out there. It's
Yeah.
getting more recognition. I went into our local gas station, which there's one gas station in town, close to town.
Yeah.
And I was cashing in a lottery ticket, and I always talk to the cashiers there. And the one, she shows me a text that her sister had sent her based off of yesterday's meet and greet, and they had a full-on dialogue going about the show. So, and then she's, like looking at me like starstruck. I'm like, oh, I feel like a little celebrity right now.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
like, gotta get going. See you next time.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. All right.
Oh, Rick, thank you.
Oh,
Thank
whoa.
you to you and Dorothy tonight.
All
We
right. Yeah.
appreciate
So
you.
before we continue any further, let's get this out of the way. First of all, Dorothy is a member once again of our channel. So thank you, Dorothy, for signing back up. Then later, Dorothy gave us a $2 super chat. So thank you. She says, happy 100th episode, Wayne and Michelle. Great show. Thank you very much. And then Rick Davis just hit us up with a $10 bill. How about that? Amazing.
Rick
Amazing.
just snuck in there.
Thank you, Rick. We really appreciate you, man. And you're here almost every show too. So we really appreciate you. And
Like I said, we've developed our own little family.
it is. It's really weird.
And speaking of family,
Yeah,
we've
and then there
got
goes the cat.
Ashes behind us.
All right,
He's
let's
ready
see.
to join.
Michelle,
Oh.
let's go ahead and start talking about people who we got in chat. So we already mentioned some people.
Oh my God, I don't even know
Here,
where
I'm
it
just
is.
going to scroll up through chat and just start naming
Oh.
people. Let's go. We got Marcel Gufonian Metalhead.
We've got Eddie Tab here.
We got Straw Dog 1.
We've got Mike J.
Yep. And let's see.
We've
Scrolling down.
got
Diane.
Taven.
All
Taven
right.
is with us.
Taben's always here.
Diane
and we've
Boss.
got Diane Boss. Yeah.
We've got Dorothy.
Yes.
We've got Jay Hall.
Jay Hall, welcome,
We've got
man.
Intergalactic Angler with
Yep.
us tonight. Hides in long grass.
Yeah.
We've got Kelly Lewis. I know that she is here.
And you know, we got Eddie Tab, right?
Rick Davis.
Eddie just messaged us and said he's watched and listened to every single episode, including the bonus episodes. He's gone all the way back to episode 0. And between him and Taben, I think we've got a tie for super fans.
We've got Metalhead. We've
Yep.
got
Kelly Lewis.
Aussie. Oh, is it Aussie Tiger?
Aussie Tiger.
I believe so.
Yep.
I'm trying. I'm like, and then of course we have Dick and Fern Harrison with us tonight.
Correct.
Got some new folks listening to the
Yeah.
show.
Oh, look at this. Look at what just happened. Do you see it?
Is that Robin?
Look. Bing, bing, bing.
Hey, we got a new member.
Richard Harrison has joined the membership. Thank you.
You have. Is it the Eyes to the Sky member?
Yep, he's an eyes to the sky
get
member.
all the alerts and everything.
Yep, he's gonna get all the emojis, all of that for his little monthly contribution. So that's awesome. Thank you guys. I'm telling you, we have some of the best people in our chat, and it's really awesome, and they're very smart too. Some of these guys ask questions that just really just blow my mind sometimes how much they know, and it's really, really cool.
Well,
right.
And like I told, Robin, when we were talking to her, it's all about networking.
Yeah.
When
Yep.
you experience something, it is all about networking.
Yep. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. So, all right, let's get this party started. So we're going to have a pretty big discussion tonight as we talk more about ancient civilizations, what possible technology they may have had, the UFO connection, the paranormal connection, and all kinds of other things. So since we're going to do a roundtable discussion tonight, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. All right, so I'm going to start by bringing on people one at a time and have them do a simple introduction. So it's going to be kind of like a debate in a way, but we're not debating. But I'm going to, after we do the, the discussion, we're going to do this with no questions. But what I'm going to do is present concepts or ideas to the crew. And then, these are hypotheses, I guess you would say, that have been circulated around the web and amongst people in different, alternative areas of history and things like that, and get everybody's take on it one at a time, and then we'll open it up for a discussion on that one topic.
And we've got a full house in the back.
Yeah. So I see Jared has joined
Yep.
us. So
everybody is here.
Yep. All right. So let's see. Let's go ahead and bring on one of our guests here first, and that's going to be Dennis Stone. Dennis, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, good to see you, and happy and congratulations on your 100th anniversary. Thank you so
very
much for having me on again.
Absolutely. And just so people know, he came to mind to me about having him on for this 100th episode because I was in New Hampshire a couple weeks ago, and me and Tom and Jared, and you'll meet Tom here in a minute, we're running around on America's Stonehenge. And I'll tell you, once I stepped foot on that property, I was like a 12-year-old. My nose was down in the ground, and I'm running around. I'm touching rocks. I'm looking for stuff. I was going just absolutely bonkers. I absolutely loved it. And so I was like, Dennis would be perfect for this. So Dennis, why don't you give just a brief overview, a little bit of history about yourself, America's Stonehenge, and then we'll move on to our next guest.
Yes. As you mentioned, we're in New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire, in the town of North Salem, New Hampshire. And I kind of grew up with America's Stonehenge. My dad got involved with it back in the mid-1950s, and it was because of a radio show out of Boston, one of the biggest broadcasting AM stations still in New England. And it was a show called Alton Hall. It was called Yankee Yarns, and it was Alton Hall Blackington. He was a native of Maine, and he did the show for many years, starting in the 1940s. On a Friday night, 1955, in the summer, my dad just happened to be listening to the show, as he always did. And the subject was all about this place we now know as America's Stonehenge. And he only lived about 7 miles away. He had never heard of the place. And the show really, it really blew him away, the mystery of the site and everything like that, but never hearing about it too. At a barber shop a few days later, he was waiting to have his haircut, picked up an old magazine, started flipping through it. And lo and behold, it's a whole story about the same site with photographs and a whole story. He asked a barber, Warren Haywood, if he could keep it or take it with him. And Warren goes, "How old is that?" He goes, "Well, it's a 1953 article. It's called New Hampshire Profiles. It's a magazine that doesn't exist anymore, but it was well written. And it was a very good article." So he took that magazine that weekend at my aunt and uncle's house, about 10 people playing cards. I was about 18 months old. I'm kind of dating myself right now, but he passed this magazine around during a card game, and nobody knew about the place until it went to my mom's sister, my aunt, and then my uncle. And they saw it, and they said, "Wait a minute, we were there in the 1930s. We used to picnic up there, and we rode our bicycles down from the town of Derry, about 8 miles away." So the next question my dad said is, "Can you find the place?" So because they said, "Well, we don't think it's open to the public. There's no road signs. It's just kind of up on top of a hill by itself in a kind of a rural area back in those days." So Sunday morning they drove around. I was left with grandma, I guess, and they rode around for a little while, and they finally saw a road that looked familiar. They took a chance. They hiked a half a mile up the hill, and right in front of them was this whole site that he had seen on the magazine and had heard about on the radio. He climbed underneath the chain link fence, which is still there today. It was put up in the 1930s by the first archaeologist. And he got underneath it, kind of trespassing, and he climbed around the site. And it was, again, he was just amazed as to what he saw. And by the time he came out, the other three had stayed outside the fence. It was kind of hard to climb underneath it and everything. And they said, "What do you think?" And he goes, "Wow, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And he also mentioned maybe getting involved with it, researching it, studying it, maybe even opening it to the public. And at that time, my mom and dad actually had built a home. They built it themselves with the help of some relatives. They had me. I was 18 months old. My sister was on her way. She was born 2 years after I was. So my mom basically turned to him, I think, and said, "You got rocks in your head," She didn't really want any part of it, I think, at that point.
Right.
But after that, my dad just really dug into this place. And he was attending college. He had just been in the U.S. Coast Guard for a few years. And he was a brand new engineer at AT&T Bell Laboratories. And his Coast Guard experience was up in Labrador, actually, right across from Lonzo Meadow, which we visited last year. where the Vikings landed. But he was there a little bit early before they really discovered what it was, but he definitely would have gone over to see it. So I grew up with America's Stonehenge. It's about a 110-acre site. We think it's one of the oldest man-made stone sites in North America, perhaps from the dating. I mean, there may be others older, but that's to our best awareness. But it's not by itself. Back in the 50s, they knew of several dozen other sites in the Northeast. Today, the number is about 800, from Quebec, Ontario, all the way down to Virginia, actually. And so we opened it in 1958. We just had our 65th anniversary last year. My dad had passed away in 2009, so he's been gone for a few years. And it's really a family business. My wife's been involved with it pretty much since she met me in 1984. She had a corporate life working for Chrysler Financial, and she worked for TRW before that, and Waddell and Reed Financial Company. She was in finances. She had her MBA and everything. And by the early 90s, she decided to basically take over the business. And we were, at that point, homeschooling my son because I was an airline pilot. We got to choose my schedule at work, and we could take the midweek off, go skiing, or go on little trips. And this homeschooling thing really worked out well for that. And then eventually my son went to college. He's an engineer now for Raytheon, like my dad was an engineer. And so I was a professional pilot. I flew for 42 years, but on my days off, I was always pretty much at the museum working there, helping out with the running the operation. A lot of maintenance work, over 110 acres of it, and in research, So it's been a real passion for me. And I know a lot of people really enjoy the site and kind of they're happy that the site still exists. A lot of these sites are missing today. My dad worked on research on some sites down in Massachusetts, and the interstate highway system was going in the 50s and 60s. Route 495 actually is sitting on top of some of the what we call beehive chambers today, which is kind of unfortunate, So some of them have disappeared, but we're trying our best to make people aware of what these sites are, educate people, hopefully get preservation and care of the structures. And ours is one of the ones you can actually visit on a regular basis. We have a visitor center. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half to cover the tour. We cover about 15 acres. In the wintertime, we open up the entire hill with snowshoeing, and we open up other features. You can see serpentine walls, chambers, and quarried slabs, these beautiful linteled windows. I don't know if you got a chance to see some of the windows when you were up there.
We did.
That's great. About 28 of those. And the serpents in the windows are all new to us since 2016, the year I retired in the spring. Right after that, I started finding them. So it's a really nice, almost like a gift, I mean, some people I was flying with, co-pilots and flight attendants, go, what are you going to do when you retire? You're in the museum, but we'd be bored. And I can say I really didn't. It's been a really nice experience for the last 8 years, And I do miss flying, but I have really enjoyed some of the things we discovered. I think would blow away my dad and all the other researchers, that have now passed on. So that's kind of my thing,
Yeah.
And my granddaughter now, she's over there a couple of days a week. She's almost 4 years old. And so it's kind of the fourth generation now of the site.
Yeah. And I want to tell people it is an amazing place to visit. And you will definitely feel that there is something very special about the place. And I mean, I was just walking around, and one of the first things I asked Tom to do was text you and ask you how big that one serpent wall that's going around. It's a circle. The serpent's biting its tail, but part of the tail is hanging out of its mouth. And I believe he said it was 2,500 feet. You guys walked that one. And I said, well, that's odd because that's 1/10 of the precession of the equinox. So, that 25,500, 25,600 years or so, we go from North Pole all the way around back to the North Pole. So
exactly,
very interesting that it happened to be measured right at that distance. But
yeah, it's 2,550 feet. That's our GPS we did it with. So yeah. Well,
almost
so that's basically my background and my little bio of, and the family was still involved with it. It's a state historic site. So we're hoping to go like this into the future, and more research and protect and keep the site open to the public.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Speaking of special, being able to feel the energy and the specialness of America's Stonehenge, I'm going to bring on our next guest, Michael Roser from Dark Hour Paranormal. Michael, why don't you go ahead and give us a brief intro and a little background on you?
Oh, thank you very much, mate. I'm happy to be here, of course, on your 100th episode. Congratulations. That's one hell of a milestone. Yeah, of course. Myself, I started an outfit for paranormal investigation back in 2007 called Dark Hour Paranormal. I was with this outfit slated for a television show up until about 2011, where I ended up catching 2 attachments from 2 different locations, which pretty much ended that effort. I spent some years going back into the armchair of research and emerged around 2018, 2019 with the podcast that I do, which is aptly titled Dark Hour Paranormal. Within these efforts, I became a panel member of Third Phase of Moon. I work with Kufan in many ways, Dr. J Radio Live. I'm part of the late Art Bell's Dark Matter Digital Network. I'm also a documentarian. And this has taken me many different places. The most recent documentary that I produced, Wayne, we spoke about it a bit when I came on the show a couple weeks ago, what it was. Documentaries on Montauk. I'm in the middle of filming the 3rd installment. The last one was called The Time Is Now, Lost Souls of Montauk. And you can find this on the channel, free of charge. It's what I have to offer in terms of this research. But essentially, in a nutshell, that's what I do. And of course, I have a very large interest in archaeology. I always have since probably the early 90s. I was very interested in some of these megalithic and ancient sites. And I am a founding member of ArchaeoX.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael, for joining us. Very happy to have you here. Couldn't think of somebody more awesome to have to talk about this on a panel discussion. So thank you once again for joining us on this 100th episode, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
All right. Our next guest is somebody probably nobody really has noticed on any shows before other than ours. He kind of keeps to himself, but he is a very powerful man behind the curtain. Let's go with Tom Elmore. Tom, how are you?
I'm good, Wayne. Thank you very much. And congratulations on the 100th episode. It's pretty exciting.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. So, Tom, why don't you give everybody a little bit of a background on you? It's going to come from a different place than I think most people are going to be expecting.
Yeah. So I'm a historical landscape architect by training. Been practicing since 1985. And about 2017, 2018, I started getting into LiDAR scanning, and that has led me into researching and documenting ancient sites and ceremonial stone landscapes. That's how I actually met Dennis several years ago. We've scanned about 16 acres up at his site there and have developed a fantastic rapport with Dennis and his family. And, I've taken my scanning to photogrammetry, sub-millimeter scanning for objects, and really enjoy the digital technologies. So,
so a totally different skill set than what we usually have on the show. But
that's right.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And you're also part of the ArchaeoX crew.
I am.
So yeah,
as well.
Awesome. Mr. LiDAR himself. Yeah, he's the one that's walking and really busting his butt on the sites, walking around carrying that scanning device.
What I do is I support the researchers with my technology, and it's exciting to be able to do that.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see. Last but not least, and by the way, don't freak out, everybody. Michelle is still here. She's over on the side here doing her production thing.
I'm in producer mode. I'm saving bandwidth and with all of our guests tonight.
Yep. So, and speaking of guests, last but definitely not least, we got to bring him on. He is the one and the only. Thank God he's the only. Jared Murphy. What's up, Jared?
What if I was a twin? That'd be cool.
There is the multiverse kind of thing. There's multiple versions of you.
Hey, remember that we've already said that you look like Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, everybody says it.
Yeah, everybody says it. So you already have a doppelganger.
There's two things. One, Tom and I have already discussed. First off, happy 100th episode. But let's get to this part where Dennis Stone is the only way to get a hold of you is Tom and I find you on a show, And B, I want to know what filters Dennis using, because if everyone doesn't know, Dennis is approximately 120 years old, and he looks about 37 right now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I feel about 107 years old, however.
But you look, it's shocking. I was,
a lot of makeup.
I'm looking at you. Yeah, what are you doing, Dennis? Why do you look so young?
It's high tech stuff, I can't explain it, But thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll mark you up on my list of my people that are good.
Get back to me. Tom, now he's get back to me.
I will do that.
Okay.
The curse of Mystery Hill is upon you.
which I know, we had a great time coming out to your site again. It was fun to watch. It's standard for any of us that do any of this remotely interested in the research. It was fun watching Wayne walk around and go, look at this, look at that, look at this.
Does have that effect.
I was bound and determined to discover something.
Yeah.
You come back, you will.
Oh, well, Wayne, I think you did find something, didn't you?
Well, the serpent, that serpent wall that was going around, I was just telling Dennis about, wanting to know what the measurement of the length was on that serpent, biting its tail, and I mean, there's some weird cuts and things on that bedrock, but we can talk about that later. But anyways, Jared, archaeox.com, what the hell is that, man? Tell us.
Yeah, you know what? So over the time that I've been on all the shows and for the times that I've gone live, the idea was all along for us to figure out and really connect our ancient history and the forgotten history, the history that Graham Hancock talks about, having amnesia. And starting ArchaeoX, the whole plan all along when I wrote It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us, Discovering a Lost History, the idea was to really start with a foundation of information where we have all these clues that the history that truly represents humanity is much, much more complicated and much older. And a lot of these just different systems, whether it's paranormal or what have you. Hello, Michael, by the way. You there? Hi.
I had myself muted. Hi, how you doing?
Hey. So speaking of paranormal, I just thought that, and Michael and not Tom. Tom came the second time and the third time, but Michael and all of us, the reason we were going to Belize is because Peru at the time was going through a coup, which is not a good time to go anywhere to look at megalithic ruins. And the idea was that one day when Dennis introduced me to Tom, I don't think he had any idea that we would hit it off so well. No, sorry, Dennis, we only call you when we're coming by. So sorry. But but we roped everyone in, for everyone listening, with Wayne. The idea was, could we create, I ambitiously thought we could create a company that would do research, that would do and support that research. It would do educational materials for the American market, the American school market, which would be fun and exciting because it would be using actual archaeological sites and finds. In fact, our first program is using Dennis Stone's America's Stonehenge. And the idea is that kids will be able to walk. Well, I should let Wayne talk about it. And the idea also was to do a show. And then also, whenever we're going to these sites, where they are places that are frequently in need of humanitarian aid and their own education. And there's just a litany of things that these places need. So what we've learned in starting this company was to apply not only a desire and a need and a checkbox for our ancient history and figuring it all out and not just not rewriting it, but just telling the true story, but being creative with where we're going and the technologies we're using to create exciting and new fun education and entertainment that we can then funnel money back into the villages and the places where we're going that can help on a humanitarian and education level locally and then internationally. And at the same time, continue for all of us to gather something, that perhaps we have a much more not only Neolithic past, but a very advanced past. But ArchaeoX is answering or trying to ask those questions. That's all of it. In a nutshell, guys, although Tom and Michael and Wayne are here, so you guys should add something in.
Yeah, well, I'm going to add in real quick about the education side. It's my view of doing this is kind of twofold. Well, actually, probably more than that. But taking sites as we discover them and learn about them, and the technology that we use to find them and work them, and turn those into interesting, hands-on as much as possible classroom lessons in the science room. And it could be, science, engineering, math, whatever. However, teachers would want to use that, but make that available. It's also to kind of inspire the kids that are doing some of this stuff, that yes, they could do this too and make some great discoveries, and start asking questions. And one of the reasons, I wanted this to happen is for one of the concepts that I want to present to the panel here in a minute, after Tom and Michael make their comments. But really, for me, that's what it's about: inspiring kids to want to get into science, learn about the technology that exists, and how we can do a lot of this stuff non-invasively. You don't have to pillage tombs, and look for answers on how these things were built. Look for ancient tools. I mean, the whole 9 yards. So, and being able to present that to kids. And my big goal would be, being able to have live streams of some of the crew. Let's say I am stuck in the classroom, but Jared, Tom, and Michael are on the ground at our Belize site and working, being able to connect them with kids in the classroom at the same time and do like live interactions instead of just playing them a video. The kids could ask questions, they could see things happening live on the ground, they could examine data, things like that. So, Michael, what do you want to throw in there?
I would say that most of that is very well said. I mean, our focus, obviously is within the archaeology, but on the second leg of that, the educational portals that we hope to be able to really make available, especially for kids who don't have that opportunity, maybe in respect to travel at that time, but they can remotely be involved and be a part of archaeological discovery. Now, that's a big point too. And I know that in the future, we have some other plans or ideas that we will implement to bring archaeology to people rather than just somebody being able to visit a site. There may be an opportunity then for them to hands-on be at the physical location and be part of that excavation. Again, that's something we are talking about, but there is a possibility within the overall vision of what we are attempting to put forward. Honestly, we couldn't have a better group of people, of like-minded individuals with the same passion and desire for not only this project, but what the field is at large. And that is incredibly important when you want to bring minds together under this scale of innovation and manifestation, because honest to God, there's a core to everything. And within ArchaeoX, I have to, very quickly point out that Jared has been a pillar for many of us in terms of what we were doing, moving forward, how we were going, inclusiveness. Just want to put that out there because that should be acknowledged. And yeah, that's what I have to say on the subject.
Awesome. Tom, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think my addition would be, you're seeing the four of us here, but once we really get started on these sites, we're going to be bringing in all different types of experts from around the world with knowledge and skill sets and technology to help and support the effort that's underway. The other thing, Wayne, that you didn't say was with regard to the educational component is making these available to the local communities within which we're working. And so I want to turn it around and give it back to you and enlighten Dennis and who the people listening. Tell the group the reaction that your students got when they saw some of the LiDAR.
Yeah, so last year when I was teaching, I was kind of piloting one of the lessons I was designing, and it takes a long time to design a lesson because you want to use proprietary material so you're not plagiarizing on anybody, and you don't want to step on any toes and things like that. So, I have to be very careful on how I do some of this stuff, and it's got to fit within the next generation science standards for the whole US and things like that. But while I was working on it, I had a couple of my really just talented students that one was from, I think he was from Guatemala. And another one, my other student was just from here in Detroit. So I pulled them aside and I started showing them some of the LiDAR scans and the little videos, because I've had Tom make little like vignettes of the LiDAR scans where it shows the scanning almost like if you were in a drone and you were in a top down or a plan view of the area, and then that drone would drop down and say go on about a 45-degree angle shot and then spin around and remove the trees, and it exposes the land. And both of those students were blown away. Now these kids are city folk. I mean, but at that point they were like, that is so cool. And then the second thing that Tom did was created some of the imaging that he took and created some prints of the 3D prints. And so I showed him some pieces of the wall from Dennis's site, and when they could put their hands on it, and Tom broke it up like a puzzle, which was really cool, they immediately tried to figure out how that puzzle went together, how that wall fit together. And with our technology now, the detail that was able to be created and in those little 3D printed pieces, the kids' eyes just lit up, and they were fired up wanting to do the whole lesson. Obviously they were not ready, and I wasn't ready to teach the lesson to a whole bunch of kids, 140 kids. And there's still a lot of stuff being worked on, but I wanted their feedback with what they saw. Hey, if I showed you this as part of a lesson, oh, that would be cool. That's awesome. So the more technology we have, the more things we can get into the kids' hands to connect them to the site, and then actually have them see the site, through a live stream from the site through people's phones or whatever. It blew them away, because they just really had no concept of what's out there. They're only focused on what's in front of them and right now. And it's like, you can go here, you can go get an education that will allow you to study places like this. And it was really quite shocking and awesome to see how the kids reacted to ancient sites and wanting to learn the history. It teased them, like, I want to know what's going on there. What is this Mayan stuff? Is this Aztec? They started immediately asking questions like you would expect kids to do, and that's exactly what you want them to do. So from the education standpoint, taking data and stuff that Tom and Jared get on site and then turning it into something for teachers to use in the classroom is kind of what my whole goal is. So yeah, good points, Tom.
And what's really interesting is, Dennis, we used your site, America Stonehenge, on that first lesson. So, and we're still in the process of finalizing it.
The kids saw the serpentine. They thought they were winding paths, or it looks like a snake or something. That was the first thing that came to their mind. And these are the minds of 14-year-olds. So yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get this 100th episode party started. And I'm going to throw out the first concept. I'm going to say a sentence here. And I'm going to start with Dennis and give it to him. And then I'll jump over to Michael. I'm just going to go as I see it here, get Michael's thoughts on it, get Jared's thoughts on it, Tom's thoughts on it, and then we'll open it for discussion, and then we'll move to the next topic. And let's just see how this goes and ends up. All right, you guys ready?
Oh.
All right.
Let's go.
All right, here we go. First, and this one's a hot button topic. Here we go. Archaeology is broken, dishonest, and the gatekeepers hide the truth. Dennis.
Well, the mainstream, basically in the Northeast, think there is no ancient stonework. They've dismissed our site and many, many other sites as the work of farmers from the 1700s and 1800s. And that's not only true of New England. I just had an anthropologist fly in from California, from another gentleman who's visited our site. and is actually working with the government on ancient sites. When I went on the tour with him, however, he had my book for 4 months to look at. And as we got into the tour, I started realizing he had not only not looked at my book, but he really didn't know anything about the site. And he had like 4 months to prepare. And I think he got a free ride out and everything, and we gave him a VIP tour. And about every question he had is in my book, about pottery, about bones, about DNA, about, different types of stone tools that we have, and things like that. And I kind of wrote it off after. I was a little bit frustrated because it's, mainstream again, I think mainstream, basically, if it's pre-colonial, they're looking at points in potteries, perhaps a burial site, perhaps a workshop, maybe a habitat site. If it's stone, chambers, standing stones, serpentine walls, windows, it's not in their vocabulary, So they're very dogmatic about it. They're still somewhat closed-minded about it. But I mean, with all the data, evidence, and facts that we have, they should really take and pay attention to these sites because they are being bulldozed. And they are being dismissive of these sites have caused some of these sites to actually disappear. And that could be their legacy in the future, So it was like that when I was 18 months old, and there's still some of that today. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's our take on mainstream. And there are some people mainstream that have helped us out too. So not to knock them off, but generally speaking, yeah, our site is probably the works of some crazy farmer,
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I'm just looking for thoughts, and don't worry about answering a question. It's just whatever comes to you when you hear what I ask.
Oh, just a couple words.
Yeah. So
okay.
Just run with it.
I would say cynical, maybe cynical and skeptical, perhaps. That kind of thing with mainstream, I think.
Yeah, and by the way, everybody, you can find Dennis's book on Amazon. It's right there. I'm showing you right now. America's Stonehenge, the Stone Ruins of New Hampshire. So there you go. It's got 5 stars. Well, it's only 1 rating, which is bizarre,
but that counts.
Yeah, hey.
Well, it's a good start anyway. It's a good start. I don't know what the second one will be, but I hope they enjoy it. They can give a 2-word, feeling about the book. A bunch of crap,
Well, yeah. All right, Michael.
Perhaps.
So the concept is archaeology is broken, dishonest, and the gatekeepers hide the truth.
Well, to sort of piggyback a little bit off of where Dennis was going, talking about the mainstream, I think the conception that, bigger institutions like the Smithsonian Museum, with any type of discovery, they swoop in, check it out, decide if they want to gatekeep it or not. There's a lot has been said for that type of action, and it does breed some sort of distrust amongst especially those who are familiar with archaeology when it comes to the mainstream. Then, on the same hand, you have people like Hawass over in Egypt, who is giving archaeology a bad name with that type of gatekeeping, which he's been spoken to about, accused of. I mean, there are multiple instances where himself, and there were a couple others within the field that may have sullied things to a certain degree. But then again, you have someone like Brian Forster, who has all the integrity and does a fantastic job bringing whatever he can to light for our general consumption. Now, the cross between mainstream and what you see on the internet and so forth is very much blurred these days because they bled into each other, and so you can find a crossover here and there. But again, not to use the same words, but I think they really do fit the situation. What Dennis had said, cynical and skeptical. Well, yes, when you breed that sort of distrust and you hear about it on a large outlet in mainstream media, that's what sticks with folks. And a lot of archaeology in general is still sort of rising to public awareness, and they might do it through articles, thrown out there within your feed. They might do it through educational institutions, through certain books, or whatever else they're writing up, doctorates, what have you. There are other ways that this is sort of emerging, but the interest itself, I find overall, not to be too long-winded here, is just being born now within the general public, or should I say being reborn, because even a couple hundred years ago, I think people were more focused on archaeology as a subject.
Yeah, good points. All right, Jared, to you. Archaeology is broken, dishonest, and the gatekeepers hide the truth.
That question practically answers itself. The reasons different people do it. There's the hubris of it. There's the embarrassment of missing it, which I don't want to waste my question time by not going back. And I want to ask Dennis a question about this, because Dennis, you grew up with the site. You grew up with, I don't know if you can count how many people you've interacted with or experienced, and the biases and everything else. I guess I'm not looking for an optimistic answer, but I am wondering if in your life experience with America's Stonehenge, have you seen a positive change in either the younger archaeologists or the people who are old enough to not give a shit about their reputation? Are you seeing any positive movement about pre-Clovis acknowledging your site? Have you seen a change over the years, or has it been an up and down, or what?
Are you talking about archaeologists, or just the general public, or both?
Kind of in reference and thematically with the question. I kind of wanted to see if I can interrupt my own answer time and just ask you, what do you think? What do you think of the experience over the last however many decades?
I think it seems like people are more receptive to this. I think the serpentine walls are hard to explain as some crazy farmers. We're finding those from here all the way out to Weed, California. They're in Winnipeg, Canada, down to Alabama. They're all over the landscape, plus windows and other stone features are being found. One of the things we heard years ago, well, if this was a culture of stone builders that built your site, where are all the others? Of course, they were ignorant of, even in the 60s, we knew of probably 200. I see that written down in the near journals, like 1967, 68. Going back to the 1940s, they knew of 16 sites. It's in William Goodwin's book, 1946, The Ruins of Great Ireland and New England. Right in the beginning of his book, he puts down 16 sites. So there was some legitimate talk or concerns that maybe our site was a one-up thing and they weren't aware of some of the others. But the numbers are over 800 different sites. And a site could be our site. It could be just a chamber like in Windham, New Hampshire. It could be North Stonington, Connecticut. And that's new to us since 2016 with over 8,000 different structures, 25 categories of structures. It's really hard to say that these are all the works of some crazy farmers and nobody knew about these. But now with OSL dating, some of the carbon datings, and even the way the stones were actually quarried and shaped using stone age technology like percussion flaking with a stone against stone, that's been demonstrated at our site. It's kind of hard for them to dismiss, just off the top, just dismiss everything as there was a crazy farmer, Patty, with his 6 husky sons. And the fact that he was a shoemaker, a road surveyor, a tax collector, he took in the town paupers later in his time, and he had only 2 sons. One died in Boston, going on 3 days short of 18, and he had 9 daughters. So he did not have 6 husky sons. He could have had 9 husky daughters. But all the things they say are not facts. It's just like they get an opinion rather than facts, data, and evidence. They go with their opinion, maybe based on somebody else who's skeptical and has an opinion. And it seems to be that, that we see. But I think it's not as bad as, I say bad in a way that we used to hear more cynicism and more skepticism. Oh, fakes, fraud, hoax, tourist trap. We get that once in a while. We might even get that on a Google review. Well, one guy did that, and he goes, I heard about your site from I forget what the travel site is, and I'm giving you a 1-star. The guy never even visited our site. So that was just somebody from the public. Like, wow, how can you, like me saying this restaurant is a 1-star and never have gone to it? It's ridiculous, the kind of stuff you see. But professionally, we're still waiting for the Smithsonian. We're waiting for the National Geographic. We're waiting for people from Harvard University, Brown University, etc. One of the gentlemen that is a film guy from Kansas City, he's been out twice, and he's going to do an ancient site doc. He does filming movies for Prime and for Showtime. So he's a really cool guy. He was out this year when Scott Walters came up for a thing. He actually interviewed Scott in our visitor center and everything. And he goes, maybe you shouldn't start talking about, this farmer thing, that kind of negative thing about the farmer building a site. And the only thing I said back to him is people always ask us, why isn't the Smithsonian there? Why is not the National Geographic involved? And all these institutions around the country, some of them have great resources. And I say, I think it's because they still hear or think that the site was built by a crazy farmer. I have to come up with it. I can't just avoid that completely, because it's still out there. And you can see that in some articles. but I think it's better than it was 50 years ago. I started guiding there in 1970. I think I saw more of it at that time. And we didn't have as much facts, data, and evidence back then either, So it's not over yet. The fight isn't over yet, So
Right. All right. And to our last member, I wanted to pass it on to Tom. So, Tom, as somebody who collects data for the research for lots of people, the statement is archaeology is broken, dishonest, and the gatekeepers hide the truth. What's your thoughts?
I think it starts right now. It's been carrying through and starting with the universities, and where those professors were trained, it's just carrying over and carrying over. And case in point, I was at a meeting this week, and I won't say any names, but Dennis, I was told that your site was all rebuilt by an archaeologist. So it's still out there. It's still prominent.
Still hear that.
However, I'm working with a site in Pennsylvania, and he's been able to get 2 or 3 of his individual sites listed on the Pennsylvania registry. So depends on where you are and who you're working with, but I think it's going back to the universities. I'm hoping that the younger archaeologists that are coming out are more open-minded and can see things that the older archaeologists are just blind to. And I think it's because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Right.
Or they don't want to actually get their hands dirty.
Hey, Tom,
the ladder on that one.
Tom, did they think we rebuilt the site? I've heard that too, that my dad built it in 1962. And this is from somebody that heard something from one of the archaeological organizations. And I'm like, in 1962, my dad built the site. That's interesting, because he opened it in 1958. I'm like, where do they get this information from? It's actually misinformation.
Yeah, it was a statement in passing, much like a political statement that I don't acknowledge because I don't agree with. Right. And I didn't want to get into a discussion.
Yeah. It's probably a no-win scenario with this person. They're not going to change their mind,
Right.
But,
yeah.
Well, Tom, it goes back to the statement of teachers are supposed to teach kids how to think, not what to think.
Yeah.
And you just ran into a prime example of it.
Well, but about 4 months ago, one of my colleagues out in Upper Michigan sent me a letter that was written, I don't know, turn of the century, 1900, 1905, from the Smithsonian. And that basically is carried forth to today. And if you want that letter, Wayne, I'll try to get that information and you can share it with your members.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I thought it was very interesting.
Was that John Wesley Powell?
I don't remember the details because I was just blown away by what I was reading.
If it's from the late 18th, John Wesley Powell and the Powell Doctrine, that's something very interesting. It set the whole tone over 100 years ago.
Wow.
Ancient sites, old world. Yeah.
All right, let's go on to our next concept, and this time I'll start with Michael, and then go to Jared, Tom, and then back to Dennis. So the next concept is, and funny that Tom brings up Michigan, the use of copper from northern Michigan and distant lands such as South America and Egypt is bullshit.
I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't be something plausible. I mean, just because it seems outlandish to us that people were doing this, it doesn't necessarily negate the truth of it. I mean, there are plenty of pyramids out there, including those in Egypt, where some of those stones came from over 200 miles away. And we're still trying to figure out, knowing this fact, how it was done. So, I mean, Jared can sort of elaborate a little bit more on what I'm going to mention in terms of terra preta. But what's been seen is that because it's so prevalent and it's all over the place, many different ancient cultures had terra preta. It seemed that there was maybe a tribe of vagabondish folk that would actually go and teach different cultures how to create terra preta. So, when you're looking at some of these threads that they need to lead back somewhere of logical reason as to how they would get all the way up there to get that copper and bring it all the way back down, or why they would do that outside of that, being some sort of very critical element that they were even aware of to make a trek like that. Again, I don't think you can take anything out of the realm of possibility. We just need to continue to research all possibilities, and eventually the most logical one arises. And if we don't have evidence for that, in many cases, in some time, we actually do.
Good points. All right, Jared, let's go ahead and jump to you on this one.
Go for the question one more time.
Sure, no problem. The statement is, the use of copper from northern Michigan in distant lands such as South America and Egypt is horseshit.
Oh my gosh. There's so much. Obviously, this is a loaded question. Thanks. We could talk all night because there's enough. Well, there's enough research already that shows the chemical analysis. It's like this bronze. It's pretty clear, even between the glyphs, the peckings that have been left that look like Phoenician ships in the area. I mean, and everyone knows in Upper Michigan. My former co-host and good friend Jennifer Deo. She is one of the good ones who has a degree in archaeology, and we were actually going to write on this. One of the things we were going to do was stop, drop, and focus on the clear, ancient, pre-acknowledged historical, likely Phoenician-driven and older mines of all that entire Great Lake area. But the amount of ancient mining that's been found, I don't know how they can continue to ignore it. And I do want to tie this into the Galt archaeological site outside of Austin, Texas. There's, again, it's Dennis's site. It's America's Stonehenge. And yeah, but Dennis will tell everyone about they did the one carbon testing. They find, well, how old, Dennis? 7,000-year-old campfire?
Yeah, so 7,400-year-old, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one. So somebody was already there, and we're getting real close to the Younger Dryas or whatever else. The reality is that the entire site is so many acres that we have no idea how old or how far back you're going to find. But you have the Galt archaeological site showing a stone floor 22 feet deep, just in one spot that they've excavated to over 18 to 24,000 years. So when you have so on one hand, the Michigan, the copper and the everything that defined what we would maybe call Sumerian to Phoenician, like early biblical kind of zones, we don't have a good idea of the amount of traffic of humanity that was living and working, and these earthworks and these pyramids that are found from Indiana to, what is the Galt archaeological site. And this is all pre-Clovis. So, and Clovis is, again, it's a made-up term by some academics that were winging it when they were doing it, and they're working off of each other's grants and agreements. And so the bronze, the copper, the mining that is clearly pre-colonial, ancient peoples, it's gotta make you wonder. What was really, what's the history of humanity, even in this, whether it's in a primitive period or a survivor culture. It's about time that Michigan, specifically capstoning this, I think it's about time that somebody gets serious about just admitting that world travel, the mariners of the day, and the mining and the technologies, things were happening way earlier than they decided to write some books on. Which, I have a big giant map book from Yale that is one of their standard study books, and I think the date on it, it's a big map book. It's from 1964. In it is a letter from one of the popes in the early 1200s, and it's discussing travel to the Americas in the 1200s. It's right there in your study book if you're going to Yale in 1964. It's a letter discussing travel to not South America, America. And there's these things where it's like there's an ebb and flow, where I know all of this is tying together, but it's very frustrating to think, oh no, they were going to Michigan, they were taking their time through the Great Lakes. There was clearly a number of communities to trade and work with. and get supplies, and they're mining, and they're traveling back to the Middle East, they're traveling back to the Mediterranean, traveling back to Europe, and we're chemically finding this to be true, that most of this, it's like, so how they can ignore it. I guess there's do we stop and try to educate the dinosaurs of the past, or do we just move on with these young kids that you teach? I wonder.
Yeah, great points. All right, Tom.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you're asking that question, Wayne, because the woman that I was referring to about that letter is one of the members of the AAPS, the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society. And I first went to their conference, which is always the first weekend in October. I went to their conference in October of 2019. First time I had ever heard of the copper trade, the copper industry, and the things that I learned. The Chinese were here excavating copper. There was this whole industry of growing food to feed the miners to excavate copper and ship it down. This October, I'm presenting with another friend out there of sites here in the Northeast to show people in the Midwest what the Northeast has to offer. But where was I going with that? I forget where I was going with that. But anyway, the copper trade is real. And I know where I was going. One of the presentations this October is a guy has calculated how much copper can be carried in a canoe. And some of these canoes were not 10 feet long. They were 20 and 30 feet long. And it's going to be a very interesting presentation as well as the whole conference.
Okay, awesome. And let's, I'm withholding all my comments because I'm more interested in hearing you guys talk. So if I'm not saying anything, that's why I'm interested in piecing some of this stuff together. So Dennis, now back to you, as Jared was saying. And again, the comment is the use of copper from northern Michigan into distant lands such as South America and Egypt is basically horseshit.
Yeah, I've been familiar with that for a number of years. I have read where I believe there was a ship in the Mediterranean that was Greek that had this copper, and it was the same purity, and they believed from the same source as either from Isle Royale in Lake Superior, but that same source runs right into Michigan, you know? So I think that's possibly a piece of evidence to support that. Roger Jewell, he wrote a couple books about the copper and the copper trade. He visited our site probably close to 20 years ago, if I recall. But I did read his books, and we used to sell them in our museum, in our bookstore. And I find that whole thing very interesting. We were just visiting Poverty Point in April, and one suggestion is that's where boats coming down from the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, that area, bringing copper down, and it was like a staging area. It was an area, kind of a trading place, and from there they would continue into the Gulf and then eventually overseas for the copper. So that's one thing I have heard as a theory, and because that was an amazing site to visit. When you visit the visitor center there, they were excellent, but I don't think they really got into overseas trade with copper, you know. But it is an interesting theory nonetheless. So I think there's a possibility, and I think it was the other gentleman mentioned moving stones. The latest at Stonehenge is one of the stones I think came from the Orkneys, about 600 miles away. It's the altar stone. So people were capable of moving stones, not only from Wales or from Marlborough down to Stonehenge, you're bringing that stone maybe 600 miles. And how do you move a multi-ton stone that far? But going across the ocean, I think that's true. I think people were coming over way before Columbus, you know, way before the Vikings. And I think it probably happened. So I think that's just a statement, just an opinion, basically. And I'm a little cynical about that, if you will.
Okay. So both you and Jared have hit, and Tom a little bit as well, what my next concept kind of idea I was going to throw out at you. But now I'm going to actually turn this into a question. So, Jared, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Considering what Dennis just said and what you said earlier about civilizations and people coming over to the Americas way before Columbus, what are the ramifications if that is true?
Oh, we got so many things. We got so many things wrong. Wait, and remember, everyone does know that Columbus only made it to the Mediterranean, right?
Correct.
But how come that's like no one ever brings that up? It's like he never.
Why parts of the Caribbean are called the West Indies?
Yeah, he swung from and missed complete. He still missed it. I mean, still hit an island, didn't hit America, and what a weird thing to perpetuate. Why would you say that that's our? So,
what are the big picture? What's the top level of the ramifications if this if archaeology, archaeologists got behind this and worked to find the evidence to prove that this is true? What happens?
It would be great. There seems to be the latch on that gate, the lock on that gate or door is a paradigm shift from a 200-year-old methodology, which they built themselves into a corner, I think. And unlike the world of tech, which has no boundaries, no rules, you don't need a degree to found Microsoft or Apple or to create Unix or to then explore technology. You just have to be willing to try and do it, like the Renaissance. So if there was a Renaissance in archaeology, the ramifications of a paradigm shift has deep political ramifications because politicians are tied to religions. Religions are tied to our current story of history. There are a segment of the pie that would be really uncomfortable with if humanity's world is actually, according to Michael Cremo, according to the confirmation of known archaeological sites that have been found with anatomically correct humans in the Red Crag in the Mediterranean. These are actual anthropological finds showing humans in 3 million, 5 million, 7 million, 20 million, 60 million year old locations. So that is a problem for the politics and religions, and then also for universities. So the ramifications are across the board, every level, for people personally who don't have any interest in archaeology, but they believe in one system or another. And then there's the actual work, which you've been, for 40, 50, 60 years, you have these hubristic people who say they're open to research, but they're missing pre-Clovis. They're missing the actual ruins that are all over the East Coast, including Genesis America's Stonehenge, and down like the Galt archaeological site and the mining and all over the world. And that's just what's above water, right? So not only do we have sunken bronze ships, but we have a lot of people who are, it's going to be topsy-turvy. I don't think people could handle. The top ramifications are that there's a number of forces that shouldn't be allowed to dictate the truth, but the slow curve of it is they have their power and their money tied to a paradigm that isn't even, it's not even fragile. It's not even delicate. It's just smoke. And so it only takes a couple of people to blow it away. We're on that precipice, I think, and then it's going to be the wild, wild west, I think. Because right now, people think the history is just a static thing, like, so we know our true history. But I think if it relates to cancer treatments and longevity and living well and living better and going from saying, hey, I have a paranormal second sight ability that the Romans knew. The Romans are well documented in knowing about second sight. And all these abilities are either accidents and part of random religions and random ideas and random magical times, or we have things like Terra Preta that were mentioned earlier, and we have an ancient engineered biosystem that may have connected to us. And I'm going to talk more about it when I come out to America's Stonehenge. But I think that, I don't know. Does it worry you what the average person might do if they get in a fight with someone who just has to be a know-it-all and let them know that their religion is wrong or you know what I mean? Like,
I honestly, my opinion on this one is it's kind of the same as if they finally decide to have quote unquote disclosure and admit that we are being visited or were visited by aliens at some point, or some extraterrestrial, whatever you want to call them, or we're being visited now. I think it's at that same level of people will fight and say it's a hoax. People will become nihilistic and be like, okay, the world as I know it is not what I was taught and what I believe, therefore it's over for me. Life can't go on. There's going to be some people who will embrace it and look at it as an opportunity. So I think, and the reason I wanted to ask the question like this was because I think the ramifications of both of these things, getting a new history on top of recognizing, paranormal abilities, paranormal encounters, UFOs, possible extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings or time travelers, all of it would upset the apple cart. And so that's my opinion, but my opinion don't really matter. Let's go to Tom Elmore.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah.
Ramifications. What do you think?
I think the ramifications are such that new knowledge is being developed all the time, and if a good portion of the gatekeepers are not allowing that knowledge to surface, then we've got to work harder. And I think that's part of what RKOX is all about. And I'll just leave it like that.
Okay. And Michael, did you want to jump on this about ramifications?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything that's been outlined is absolutely true. Looking at the paradigm that we've been fed, and I'll say it that way because, when you're born, you're given a perception of the world. It's not until, you prepubescent or adolescent years that you're actually aware enough out of that paradigm or allowed to grow to a certain point where you can have opinions about, the world and what have you. So the paradigm here, and Wayne, you kind of touched on something I was going to mention already, which is, the interconnection between, or possible interconnection between extraterrestrial life and ancient civilizations. It doesn't necessarily have to stretch into the idea that, some of these structures were actually built by aliens, although that's a very real possibility. But it's quite clear if you do just a little bit of research, even topically, you'll find that petroglyphs and, hieroglyphs and all sorts of different ancient recordings do have some sort of mysterious interaction with what appear to be extraterrestrials. So within that, let's say that ancient civilizations now leading to extraterrestrial disclosure, these are, divulged to the public. Next question is going to be, well, what about the technology? Because that's going to come into play. And then basically the whole curtain's going to blow off the entire window. And that's the only way that any of this can be divulged, because if you divulge one leg of each one of these aspects, it's just going to lead back to more of that. And again, as you've mentioned, Wayne, a nihilistic sense may come about people, the cynicism, knowing that they've been lied to, but not just lied to about a few things, about the exact existence of life and the history that we hold as human beings. And many people, if you ask them, believe they have a right to know our history. I don't think you'll come across one person who says they don't. So when they realize they've been fed the wrong version or pre-contrived version, which is actually more accurate in terms of, these ancient societies and so forth, and how they molded and sculpted the reality that we experience today, it's all reminiscent of that. Once you realize this is a big folly, well, yeah, some people might become despondent, have no direction, apathetic, and then others may take it, upon themselves to really reach out. Religion itself will never really go away, I don't think. I think they'll just incorporate this somehow in whatever shape they want to do it. And personally, I don't have a problem with that. As long as you have the truth in front of you and you choose to believe whatever you want, that's up to you, and that's okay. But it will shake the very foundation upon which this paradigm stands, and it will affect every single person in every society.
Awesome. Great points. And Dennis, you want to end this topic, and what are your ideas, the ramifications, if that is true, that civilizations have been visiting and we're a worldwide traveling at some point?
I like your analogy with the UFO issue. Possibly being.
I got a list of stuff here about it, so it's all bleeding in.
It kind of like that in a way, and because you'd have to rewrite the history books, and not a lot of people might be wanting to do that, comfortable with doing that. You teach it a certain way, you learn it a certain way, and a little bit of that. So there might be some politics involved with that too. But our site was the center of that whole thing back in the 1930s when the first researcher was here, William Goodwin, and he ran against great naval historian Samuel Eliot Morison from Harvard University, who coined the term NEPCO, No Explorers Before Columbus. And he wrote Admiral of the Ocean Sea about Columbus. He wrote the European Discovery of America. He died in 1976, and Costanzo Mero was actually kind of in 61, because we just visited that last year. In 61, they kind of knew they had enough evidence that it was a Viking site. By 64, they actually proved it with a little stone world. And even though he knew that before he died, he said, well, yeah, they did come here, but it wasn't of much consequence. So basically, his theory of no explorers before Columbus was blown up kind of, but he never really came forth and really said that. But he and Goodwin went back and forth for years, starting in 1937 when Goodwin got involved with our site, purchased a site, and then he worked there until he died in 1950. So that paradigm, there's probably a reluctance to rewrite the history books. And I don't know all the answers of why they wouldn't want to know the truth, but I would like to know the truth. And I think a lot of people would too, but those in power or whatever, they're reluctant to do it. Even starting on local archaeological groups, again, who kind of think our site is, some sort of fake fraud. They really don't know the site, So we're still today having that same problem, But I think the public would like to know the truth, I think.
Me personally, also, I would think that besides all of the paradigm shifting and everything that would happen, my brain would go to it being a great opportunity, because as Dorothy said in chat here, she said educational publishing companies would go berserk. They would, but imagine you would have to hire writers, you would have to get new textbooks put together, you would have to develop whole new curriculums that go with those textbooks, and it would be a money-making situation. That's just a huge opportunity. But all right, let's go on with our next concept, and this time we'll go Tom, then we'll go Dennis, Michael, Jared. So Tom, here's the next one for you. Some natives around megalithic sites claim they weren't the ones to build them, or it was a previous parent culture that created them. You're on mute, Tom.
Sorry about that. I think I'm going to punt on this because I'm actually so new to researching this stuff.
Okay.
And I'm the guy with the technology walking around with my head down so I don't trip and spill my technology.
That just makes them more credible.
I know.
All right, let's go ahead and jump over to Dennis. Dennis, you're up on that one.
Yeah. Well, we have two different examples. We had the Holzer Files filmed at our site in 2020. It came out in 2021 with David Schrader. Scott Walters was a guest on the show. They also had Daryl Jameson, part of the Wampanoag tribe in Massachusetts. He's a branch of that, and he's a chief. He goes by Black Eagle, and he's been to our site a couple times. He was there several years ago, and when he came up to the main site, he actually had an episode. He thought he was, I think he thought he was having a heart attack. So it really affected him that way, and he's pretty sure it was a site, because as soon as he left the place, he was healthy. He had no other issues. He did come back for the show. They filmed him only halfway up to the watch house from the visitor center, so he would not go back on the site. And if you want to watch that episode, it's season 2 on the Discovery or a Travel Channel network. And he actually explains where he doesn't think it was his ancestors or even distant relatives that were involved with the stone building of this site, and others too. The other one is Paula Underwood, an IBM consultant. She was Iroquois, but she lived in California, not in the East Coast. And she grew up learning 10,000 years of oral tradition by her dad. And she had to kind of repeat it back 2 different ways so she would have the story scraped. Sort of like a parody check, I think it is. And her book came out well over 20 years ago. I forget the date. It's a very, very thick book. It's all of her oral tradition. When she became aware in the 1990s that these stone structures are all over the Northeast, she was a little bit surprised, because in her oral tradition, she talks about these hills with these stone structures, but it was not her people. It was a strange people that built them. So that's my two experiences with Native Americans in these sites. There may be others, of course, Native Americans that may have been involved with these sites. You know, we just don't know the prehistory. Manitou, a book that came out in 1989 by two of our researchers, Byron Dix and James Mabur Jr., really kind of pushed towards a Native American involvement from a point that there's so many of these sites, and it would take so much work that a few shiploads of old world visitors might have a hard time building these, unless it was an enormous time span, you know, a lot of years to build these structures kind of thing. So there was kind of a third thing there. But the two Native Americans say that their ancestors were not the ones building these structures. So that's what I have.
Okay. Michael, before you jump on it here, I just want to let everybody know that there is a poll in the chat room for YouTube, and it asks, do you think that the builders of megalithic structures had an advanced technology to build them? So everybody in chat, make sure you're answering that. I see we got 28 votes so far. So thank you very much for that. So Michael, back to you. Some natives around megalithic sites claim they were the one, or weren't the ones to build them, or it was a previous parent culture that created them. Your thoughts?
I've heard this on many occasions and all over the world. Many times they can tell you who they think it was that built them, and then there are other times that they can't. Maybe that's something that's lost within their history. Maybe they never really had the answer, but they know it wasn't their civilization that created these. Now, you go out to Montauk, and there has been talk about pyramids at Montauk. In fact, there is at least one picture that I've seen that actually has in frame, with somebody standing next to it for reference, the size of these smaller pyramids that went all along the coast. So the story goes, when the settlers came over and, you know, met the what we call them Algonquin Indians now, but there's many different tribes within that area. You know, they asked them about certain structures that were there. Well, how did you build these, and how did you build these pyramids? And they're like, well, you know, we are responsible for these structures over here, but we didn't build the pyramids. And so the settlers would say, well, then who built them? They said, oh, it was the people that come from Mars. We don't really like them. They steal our food and take our women and children, and they apparently built it for some sort of grid that interacts with our planet and Mars's, you know, electromagnetic field. I don't know what kind of verbiage they were using to express that, but that's how the story goes. So again, I mean, in researching this, you may find it much more common than not that some of these, you know, Native American or indigenous people of whatever country have their own history, but still have no knowledge about certain structures that they're being labeled as the ones that actually created them on a mainstream outlet. It's just, you know, misdirection of some sort in terms of this misinterpretation. But then again, maybe that's intentional when it comes to that perception in mainstream. Maybe it's something less. You know, I'm not really sure, but certainly it's there to observe.
Yeah, great points. It also makes me think sometimes that maybe the natives, you know, the native tribes might want to say something like that to try to hide what it was that they knew, you know, or you know, trying to keep their knowledge occulted or secret, you know. So just my thought on it, that they would say something like that. But yeah, I think a lot of you are right on that with they don't know. So Jared, why don't you close this up for us on this topic? Some natives around megalithic sites claim they weren't the ones that built them, or it was a previous parent culture that created them.
It's so frustrating for all the things that we talk about that are allegedly woke, that apparently every indigenous tribe and community of ancient peoples don't know their history, don't know what they're saying, yet they are all consistent about having extremely detailed, hand-me-down, can't manipulate it or burn it like the Catholic Church histories that they know. And I know some great archaeologists and people like Jen Deo, and they did their work and they're like, hey, maybe we should talk to the actual indigenous people and find out their history before we tell them what their history is. So you have standard academia telling them, and then we have all these actual indigenous stories, which aren't just allegories or folklore. They are also truths and facts about the ant people, the moon-eyed people, and all of the stories that go back to who saved the Navajo back during what would have been the Younger Dryas, and the large areas they were brought underground that saved them. All of this ties into the fact that what kind of arrogance, why on earth would you tell people their history when over and over our earliest documented to just, and now they're over it. It's sad. I know plenty of different indigenous native communities, and it doesn't matter, around the world. They have a whole nother history. They don't want to share it because they did share it, and they were laughed or shut down or told what their history was. And by who? Some guy in a frilly shirt or something, and eventually someone with a $300,000 degree. It's just sickening. It's annoying, and it's frustrating that despite being woke doesn't have to do with actually listening to indigenous people and their actual histories. That's not part of it. And that isn't my only point, but at the same time, if we're going to capstone this, it's like we should, in re-looking at our past, we need to really reference and listen to the people who have the history that were here. We need to listen to those stories. We need to listen to those histories. And if we can't at least start with that, we're really behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, good points. All right, let's see. We're going to go back to Dennis here. Okay, next concept. High-tech tools were used in the construction of some ancient sites, but none of the tools have been discovered, or have they? Dennis.
Well, that's a great question, which I do not have any answers. But when you look at some of the constructions, the way the stones are actually, cut so precisely, especially when you get into South America, the multi, sides, and they fit together so perfectly, you can't put a razor blade. It does raise, these people are amazing craftsmen, but what tools did they use? And some of the stone is very hard too. Some of it's just not like, sandstone. Obviously that's not a good building material, but even coral or something like that. This is really hard material. I'm sure one of the other people have a better answer for that, but that's the thing. Where are the tools that they used? Sometimes they say copper tools are used, and the copper is pretty soft. Bronze is a little harder, and iron tools are just about the same. But where are these tools? And you see the precision that they put them to, how accurately these things are lined up with perhaps true north, east, and west. They actually not only built the structure, but the orientation was so precise. If they were off a little bit, they would probably have to tear the whole thing down and build it again. But that is amazing too, not just the structure, but how they're orientated maybe towards a solstice, maybe towards an equinox, cross quarter day, or the cardinal points. That's another part of that. So, but where are the tools? Great point.
Right.
Good question.
Okay. Michael, you want to jump in on this? Your turn.
Yeah, you can just repeat the question for me?
Absolutely. It says, high-tech tools were used in the construction of some ancient sites, but none of the tools have been discovered, or have they?
I think it's important to keep in mind that when we look at what we have today technologically, of course, we consider ourselves a very advanced civilization given what we have to what our knowledge is, and then, of course, what's purported within militaristic uses. Putting this together, I can understand the perception. So when you go into your house and you flick on your light switch and the electricity goes to the bulb, you say, okay, we have electricity. It was discovered, and, we are all now using it in one form or another, but it's the same setup. Grids in, all sorts of things come into play when you're dealing with electricity on a large scale. The only thing we continue to forget, or at least have a tendency to overlook, is that ancient civilizations had electricity too. But instead of it being done the way that we do it, it was maybe through a chemical process. And these are the artifacts that we found and have been able to identify. There are plenty of tools and pieces that we have discovered that we're not sure whether they went together or they were used standalone, what they were used for, but they clearly had a purpose. Going back to, the calendars that we found in the past, different societies use different methods of keeping time. And many of them were aligned within celestial events. And of course, this goes all the way back to as far as we can trace. But that being said, their knowledge and their type of technology may be even more advanced than what we're using today, and perhaps even cleaner. And this is one of the reasons you can't find some of those remnants of what they used to do technologically. Perhaps they've already broken down. But that's because that they had a culture that was more imbued within nature and more in harmony within nature. So what they were doing was more or less out of necessity, instead of the superfluous activities that we get into, based on certain desires and so forth within this realm. These ancient civilizations had a different aim, different direction, and had different use of, I think, the tools that they were working with, but still had high technology, much of which has been lost to time, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, here's one thing I want to make a quick statement about the panel here, and this is what I find awesome with the people we have on here right now. And before I turn this over to Jared, everybody with their thought process, for the most part, has stayed away from any kind of speculative statements, and all of you have been putting forward evidence to back your statements, which is outstanding. Because I think a lot of people will get on these shows and say things, and it's all speculation. Well, what if this? Well, what if that? Or maybe they did this, or maybe they did that. Each one of you is actually using a critical thought process and bringing forth evidence to either rebuff what I'm saying or to add more to it. So kudos to you guys. I really appreciate that. And Jared, let's go ahead to you now and talk about high-tech tools. What do you think?
Well, you mean existence, or about, are you in reference to like what Dennis was talking about
yeah, we're
high-tech?
Were high-tech tools used in the construction of some ancient sites, but none of the tools have been discovered, or have they?
Well, we have the nano bits of gold screw-looking in the Ural Mountains in the 90s. So there's those objects. I think you've showcased them. I've showcased them. I had them at the lecture before America's Stonehenge tour the first year. But there are literally gold parts that were found. They were looking for gold mining in the Ural Mountains in Siberia. And the age is at least 22,000 years to 220,000, and it leaned more on the 220,000-year-old, just the layers that they found them in. But these are very precision, almost nano-sized gold parts. I mean, granted, the gold mining industry, they're looking for just traces of gold, so they were able to locate these bits, and there was one Russian scientist talking about them. But these are actual indicators of ancient high technology. They're gold bits. And then we have the aluminum, which they try to say was a Messerschmitt. They found an aluminum precision machined object that was only, well, the problem with it is that it's aluminum, but it was 700 years before aluminum was discovered. And it was found under a head of a mastodon. And so that doesn't make any sense. And so it's not like, one of the theories was that a Messerschmitt crashed and it somehow jammed it underneath the mastodon skull, and that's how that piece of aluminum got there. But based on the metallurgy, it's over 700 years old, and it's a machine part. You can find it on ancient origins. You can find all these things I'm talking about. So there have been actual objects found. And in reference to the bronze mining or the copper mining and America's Stonehenge or anything else, I'm going to do some old school sharing for everyone. So hopefully this will focus.
Let me blow you up here a minute.
Oh, there we go. That is Doggerland.
Move it back just a little bit. There we go. Right there.
Oh, is it focused?
It keeps on going in and out. You have it 1 minute and So basically, what Jared is showing is the UK and
You
a
can pull it up.
landmass in between. There you go, right there. The UK is connected to Europe by a large landmass, and it looks like there's a large lake in between the UK and.
That's all land.
Oh, is
That's
that
all
okay?
land.
Maybe that's ice.
Doggerland. So
Okay,
all of
Doggerland.
Scotland and England, that is what, and if you look at the dates from 16,000 down to 7 and 6,000 years ago, and there's the current land mass, when Dennis's land, when all of those coastal territories at 7,000 years, if you would have been trading, you see the dark green area, all that was above water. And the dark green area was the last to go. The largest area was there 16,000 years ago, and maybe to the 8,000 or 10,000 years ago. Maybe it was there before, even after the Younger Dryas. But that's where people lived. They didn't live in England. They didn't live in Scotland and Ireland. They lived in Doggerland. And those dark green areas also date, the dark green areas date to the coastlines that people would have been traveling to if they were going to America's Stonehenge, if they were going to Michigan. People need to think. And so does archaeology. When they go underwater, they go find a wreck, a galleon, they go find a Phoenician, something or other. But what they don't do is consider that these are where villages and towns and people were that were actually trading in that copper, trading with tools, working and living. People like coastlines. That's a lot of coastline. And that, what I'm showing you there is representative. When I wrote Not Aliens, I spent so many hundreds of hours, and I worked with an artist and a technical someone who knew how to do maps, and we brought back the coastlines of what the world would have been as these different eras were happening. And to find these tools, we're lucky. We found some stuff in the Ural Mountains. We found something in Germany. We found there's been other objects that all the machined pots and the objects that have been found from Egypt to Peru, the building constructions themselves show very much the evidences of tool cutting, saw cutting. Those marks are there, not just pecking, but like high revolution speed saw work. Flinders Petrie, the alleged founder of, Petrie was cool. He was considered the father of Egyptian archaeology, but it was problematic that he kept finding machine bored out like 10 feet, 20 feet long bore outs of what looked like revolutionary spins that was 20 to 30,000 times faster than what we can even do today, let alone in the Industrial Revolution. So the indication of high-tech tools are all around, but then there's a biological component. Like Michael brought it up, sorry to take time on it, but we have all these weird things that we think, that's a genetic anomaly, my ability to have second sight or some paranormal ability or connect with my twin, or I prayed about something, or there was this energy in the air, and yet we have these indicators of massive, not just floral and bird patterns and the Nazca lines, and there's the Bolivian lines and the Peruvian lines, and there's these lines seem to have electromagnetic abilities. It seems like this between the soils and these large geo antennas, maybe we're talking about maybe having onboard biological systems, which is beyond the scope of our 100th episode. But all I'm saying is that it seems like the tools that we're mistaking as maybe either a paranormal or an accidental genetic gift, that we have a divorced, safe-moded planet and biological system that was once honed and engineered and shaped, and it's not just a natural coincidence. It's that we once had a planet that we had engineered to a point where we had a biological onboard system instead of a brain implant. It's just that a lot of our alleged junk genes and these abilities are actually part of a conscious system. So we have physical tools, indicators of nanotechnology, tool and shaping and cutting on megalithic blocks and machining at speeds we can't comprehend today yet. And then we have biological systems that are really showing that we can connect with animals to trees to whatever, and it's not just a woo-woo thing. It's like a safe-moded biological programmed system that, boy, we need more time, right? How about
Awesome. All right, Tom, as somebody who works as an architect and many tools, and I've seen your handiwork in your house and your yard and everything else that you've done. Your thoughts on this?
But what you haven't seen is the hammer that's left outside, because I picked it up. And so one of the things that I'd like to suggest is, like when we build a skyscraper, we take our crane down and move it off site so it's not there. How did we build the skyscraper? Well, next people may ask that same type of question. So I don't have the answer for you, but as Jared was talking, I was thinking about being very intrigued with the star holes and how did they actually get made. And so someday I'm going to see one in person and bring some of my technology and scope it, and then make a 3D model and a print of it and really study it, because I haven't seen that level of technology used for that microscopic detail yet.
You know what's been super exciting about you, Tom, is having you on board doing all of the technical actual, like, it doesn't matter what we say, you're the one actually doing the actual work to actually prove all this out. It's great.
Or at least I dream about doing the work.
Well, hey, Wayne, you missed it. You know, Tom's busy scanning when we're in Belize, and he's like, my goal was to do one pyramid. Now I've done like 30.
Well, you know, Tom, one thing I would like to actually do is go to Egypt with you and have you take a look at those black boxes in what is it, Saqqara? Have you seen those contraptions?
Saqqara?
Yeah. So I would love to see Tom's reaction in person to those things.
If that's what I'm thinking of, you know, I was part of a discussion a year or two ago, and we were talking about how was that done, and I was thinking, well, let's just hire a really competent cabinet maker. How would he do it today out of wood? And then try to extrapolate that concept to the stone.
Okay.
Well, that's a great point too, because Stonehenge seems to have the mortise and tenon and also the lap joints, which are basically carpenters kind of markings they would make on wood to join them together. And that's what they used on Stonehenge. So I heard that years ago. There's some carpentry methods used to build Stonehenge, you know, so kind of an interesting kind of maybe correlation to that. But.
All right. I got two more concepts to go here. And the next one, and it's perfect timing because I've got Michael's name next to this one, and we're starting with Michael on this one. So this worked out perfectly. All right. So now we're getting into it. Michael, starting with you. Ancient sites are connected with mystical power known as ley lines. They have some kind of paranormal energy around them.
Yeah, I mean, this has certainly been observed. I mean, I don't think that ley lines are a scientific definition. I think more research needs to be held in that respect. But anybody who has been to a ley line that's been talked about or known about as one or an intersection can tell you how much different it feels to be there. And many of them purport experiences, whether this be some sort of out-of-body experience, whether they see extraterrestrial life, cryptids, paranormal activity, you name it. It runs the entire gamut. So if these ley lines are exactly the way that they are, and again, going into ancient cultures, it seems that these different civilizations would exploit certain areas of land because of this fact, or this idea, I should say. If they are the way they are, then we may have a better insight into the inner workings of some of these cultures, and perhaps that would lead us down a path to explore some more of where their technology may have come from, or at least the mindset in respect to working with the celestial fields and, you know, bodies that are out there within the calendars that they kept track on. So the ley lines themselves, again, is sort of it's a peripheral thing, but a very significant thing when it comes to talking about ancient sites, because even though it's still speculative to a certain degree, you know, intellectual deduction counts for quite a bit. And I think we can come to an observed conclusion based on not just anecdotal experiences, but going and visiting some of these places for ourselves. And myself, and I'm sure many of you here, have intentionally stood in an area known as a ley line and felt that difference. And that's something you can't put your thumb on experientially, but to bring that into the evidential world of science may still take us a little bit of time. But again, bringing it back to these ancient civilizations, their utilization of this type of energy and knowledge of it was probably akin to them moving some of these larger stones and perhaps using acoustic levitation or geomagnetic levitation against the earths. They had that knowledge, and perhaps these were highways to boost some of that activity.
All right. Well, I can tell you, I felt something when I was at America's Stonehenge. Now, it could have just been the wonder of being on the site, but I'll tell you, I was. You asked Tom and Jared, I was gone. I'm like ADHD. You couldn't give me enough Ritalin or Prozac or whatever to slow me down. I was on fire. So, and I don't know if it's tied to that or just the excitement of finally being able to step on that site and seeing it for real. So Jared, to you, about these ancient sites that are connected by mystical powers known as ley lines, and they have some kind of paranormal energy around them.
Yeah, there's I had the privilege of talking with Eric von Daniken privately, and he said that he had gone to Peru as one of, being the kind of ambassador he is to getting Peru literally on the map for tourism when his Chariots of the Gods came out and everything else. And he was saying, look, because I'm an honorary Peruvian, they let me do some electromagnetic experiments on the ley lines and on the lines where the long. Okay, so for people that don't know, yeah, there's birds and monkeys and whatever. Great, that's all dynastic. But there are these long lines in Nazca, and they're not just in Nazca. They're around Peru. They are in Bolivia. There's lines like this in the Middle East, and they seem to have a chemical composition that allows for some sort of piezoelectric, electrical, some sort of magnetic traveling or something of signals, of energy, and what have you. And he pointed out that they got to do experiments, and they were able to prove that there was an easy current connection between posts, and those experiments are, I'm just pointing out one experiment with something that has nothing to do with the fact that, like, Michael Roser's really dialed in on this stuff and I think depending on our personal gene expression and where we're at, we may have different immediate senses. We may sense something in some of these places and call it paranormal or have a connection to it, but its true technical functions for when it was being used 10, 20, 30, 50 plus thousand years ago, or what buildings or what materials were used to have the function for lines like in Nazca. That the longest one that I know of is 25 kilometers long. Doesn't deviate an inch. It's 25 kilometers long. All the lines seem to be, again, systems that were probably part of a larger Earth grid, and which they re-engineered or sorted out in some ancient period of time. And over time, they developed a system that included this Earth network within what we think now is natural or paranormal. And in reality, I think this is something that was slowly over time used. Just like right now, you can buy earth runners. I have a pair that has a little copper dot that allows it wires to my toes. It allows me to ground that electron field directly to the earth. And I don't have to go barefoot. I do go barefoot, but the point is that we figured this connection out. I think it's very elementary, the level it's not technological. We just kind of scratched our heads. We figured it out. But in the ancient past, these ley lines and these Nazca-like lines are all part of a system that was clearly developed to have a higher function. And we don't know what that is, but it sure is fun to come up with the questions.
Yeah. Tom, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm jotting down some notes here. So building off of what Michael just said, I've done 2 projects at Newport Tower in Newport, Rhode Island. It's this stone structure. Nobody knows how old it is. Nobody knows who built it. It shows up on some very early maps. And while we were there, a colleague of mine pulled out her dowsing sticks.
Oh, yeah.
And I made the mistake of joking on her on a previous site, and she proved me wrong. So I don't joke about dowsing with her anymore. So she actually found a crisscross directly centered under the tower. And we mapped it with some flagging, and we put some survey tape down, and we photographed it and documented it. So I do believe that these ley lines are important sites that are documented with structures, whatever those structures might be. At America's Stonehenge, as I was working up there, I had my scanner, which is modern high-tech technology, shut off in 3 different locations, 20 minutes into a 30-minute scan. And I mentioned it to Dennis, and he said, "Oh, yeah, where did that happen?" And when I told him, he said, "That's very interesting because the drone pilot lost control of his drones on top of those 3 sites in those locations." And then the third experience that I have with these electromagnetic ley lines is down in Belize. I was standing on top of a mound to start a scan, and the scanner would not start. My scanner always starts. So I climbed down the 30 feet down to the base of the mound to try to turn the scanner on. It wouldn't turn on again. I walked 20 feet away and it fired right up, and I got a fantastic scan. There's something to this energy. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to try to find the technology and the people to help us document it and try to learn about it.
Awesome. Okay, Dennis, do you want to close this out for us on ancient sites, mystical powers known as ley lines, or power grid known as a ley line, and paranormal energy around these sites?
Yeah, we're in a number of different books about ley lines and sacred geometry of the earth. But back in 2012, my son Kelsey was using Google Earth, and he was between college. It was a college summer. I think it was a spring break, and he was out of college, and he started taking some of the lines from an astronomical center of our site on the alignments themselves, and just kind of going out to see what was out there, And the first one he really found was a stone about 1,000 feet from the main site. It's a great big standing monolith. And it is on the true north alignment with the astronomical center I mentioned, a true south wall, which is a serpentine wall too, we believe, the North Stone, and then it goes right through that. And I thought he wanted to check that because he was aware of that stone. It was actually at that time behind my dad's house. My dad had died in 2009. My son had taken over the house. It was right there. But then he took the line over the summer solstice sunrise, and it went northeast. It went through Maine. He just continued it. Maine doesn't have a lot of these ancient sites. It seems like of New England and the Northeast. Maybe they haven't been found, but it has a few stone chambers, but not like Vermont, not like Connecticut, and even New Hampshire or Massachusetts has quite a few. The Hudson Valley has over 500. But he went across the ocean. He ended up in southern England, and he's been to Stonehenge a few times. And it went in southern England. He said, well, that's interesting. I think Stonehenge is down there somewhere. So he changed the scale, kept changing it, finally blowing up, and all of a sudden, Stonehenge starts to appear. And that line on the summer solstice sunrise goes right through one of the large trilithons. And there's kind of a horseshoe-shaped pattern. A couple are fallen today. It went through one of the standing ones that's still there, right through the center of it. He had to do that several times just to make sure he didn't have some errors in there. It's like 3,000 miles or whatever. We've done it. I've done it many times, and it's right on the money. That became a subject of Scott Walter's first year of America on Earth on History Channel. It was episode number 6. Well, my son kind of showed me how to use Google Earth. The younger generation know how to use all this stuff, and I started using it. And then I had him kind of back me up by checking it himself. And I said, we have visitors all the time. I said, check it out. Send us an email. Call us if you see there's an error. We just don't want to put out bad stuff. Well, I found that the equinox sunrise goes through the Canary Island truncated pyramids, and I didn't even know they existed there, but it goes right through them. The south alignment goes right through Machu Picchu in Peru. The winter solstice sunset goes through the moon pyramid at Teotihuacan in Mexico, right north of Mexico City. My dad and I visited that site back in the 80s. And the equinox sunset goes through the Sun Temple at Mesa Verde. And we've been there, I think, 3 times out to that particular site. And that's some of the alignments. Next year, my friend Maria Wheatley, she lives near Avebury, right near up the road from Stonehenge. And she's kind of getting to be world famous about her dowsing. She's been on History Channel. She's going to be in Chaco Canyon, I think, in another month or so. She just went to Egypt, Malta, and a couple of other sites. But she's been on, like I say, a lot of different shows. She does podcasts, and she's going to come over and do a couple-day event at our site. And she's going to teach me a little bit more about dowsing, because we've discussed this for about 5 years. I've known her. But she's supposedly one of the leading authorities about dowsing in the world. And she's friends with Hugh Newman, Andrew Collins, Graham Hancock. She knows all these people, So we're looking forward to that. It's going to be in May. So maybe I'll have a little more information about dowsing maybe next year at this time, So something we're looking forward to. But we have alignments with a lot of these famous UNESCO World Heritage sites around the world, actually, I don't think it's all coincidental. I don't know how to explain it, but they do align,
Yeah, good points. All right. The last concept to cover for tonight, and we've already hit on it a little bit. So we're going to start with Jared. Then I want to go to Tom, then Michael, and have our guest of our special guest of the evening, Dennis, go ahead and close this out. So here it is, the big one. Ready, Jared?
Oh, go for it.
All right. The UFO connection. Ancient sites interacted with aliens or some kind of higher intelligence that passed on knowledge of building and technology.
What's the question? You just said a bunch of words and then there wasn't a question, Wayne.
All right. So the UFO connection, ready? Ancients interacted with aliens or some kind of higher intelligence that passed on knowledge of building and technology.
Like, did they do it? Is that the question?
Well,
what was that, Michael?
Put the word "did" in front of it.
True or false, and why?
Oh, is that it? True or false?
Your thoughts on it?
Oh my God, I'm a space traveling anthropologist. I'm an alien, and I'm like, oh God, those poor fuckers are language. They're trying to pick up a 3,000 ton block because hunting and starving and not dying isn't big enough for my day. I'm like, I'm going to move this 3,000, 1,000 ton block. Okay, let's help the bastards out for a couple hundred years, and we'll really F with them in their history in the future. Yeah, that was. That could have been that could have been some real funny UFO person that just said, hey, we're gonna help them move some blocks, but we're not gonna tell them what to do with it. Or we've again have millions of years of human history that we've neglected, which include higher epochs of technology and civilization, and as we do now with nanotechnology. The singularity is near. Ray Kurzweil's new version of that book just came out, and he's discussing the point when man and machine are kind of being one, but also the ramifications of the biotechnology. So again, a highly advanced ancient point, an epoch of human achievement, which included a global civilization that was engineering what we would consider natural and nature, which would also then mean that if you wanted to manipulate your biology and your cellular system, you could look like anything you want. You could be anything you want. You could engineer like the Borg, except without external components. You could just manipulate what you look like. So yes, there are space traveling anthropologists, but based on the technology from the megaliths to the engineered soils that no one talks about, and these ley lines and it's interesting. We have paranormal and we have these religious experiences, and twins are connected to each other, and people can see the future and people can see the past, and they can remote view. It's all separate systems, and there's all these separate religions. Or we are all living in a safe mode of old advanced biotechnologies that when you see an alien, and people are like, there are aliens. They are aliens in that, yes, but either we're at the ass end of the universe And there's a good chance that we develop technology that would allow us to manipulate how we look based on our functions and based on how we would connect to this biotechnologies. Things that we would think are natural are possibly connected to people that may look white or gray or reptilian, or pick whatever you want. But there's a good possibility that the ancient advanced humans did not all die off, and that they look similar to us, or they look alien to us. So we assume, yeah, there's aliens because they have technology we don't have. Well, there are nano bits and parts from 220,000 years ago we're finding in the Ural Mountains, and there's this aluminum thing, and there's these other things, and there's all these ancient mathematics and technologies. It sure seems like that going beyond that in a biotechnical way, you could be human, but just not look human. And you could have technological abilities, including flying around the planet and flying off the planet, and have already been off the planet and have already settled other places and had come back and gone, oh, we really messed this all up. And so, in short, yeah, there is and possibly are space traveling anthropologists, but we continue to, it's not to say there are, it's important that we figure out like how much of this is military and we're reverse engineering technology and we're developing our own and we're 100 years ahead of where we think we are now. But the sources of that technology, when we go, well, by God, it's alien. How about there's a good chance that small segments, fractions, by the way, what concerns me? Why don't they get along? How did they F up our planet? How the hell did they send us literally into the Stone Age? So we go from advanced megalithic ruins to people in loincloths restacking Stonehenge into a worship center. And so we want to respect all this history and figure it all out. But at the end of the day, UFOs, to constantly have the vernacular and the dialogue that they are from somewhere else, that they are not human, that these are, or that they're just military technologies that we don't understand because they're reverse engineered from people from somewhere else, completely is a fog of war to the fact that we need to consider that some of our asshole relatives effed up our planet and ourselves. They aren't saving us. They aren't giving us the cure to cancer. We're still killing each other over 5,000-year-old religions, and yet we have clearly another history that the biggest problem I have with UFO, the idea of just constantly identifying that there are interdimensional things from somewhere else and not our asshole relatives, just kind of like, do we help them more? Do we fix it? We're just not leaving. They don't know where we live, below the ocean, but we can't leave, but we do leave, but we just don't help them. Like, I don't want to think about the fact that we're devolved cockroaches. I'm ending us on a dark note, everyone. Your turn.
All right, over to Tom. Tom, good luck
Why do you always make me follow that?
You're going to say something. You'll say something better.
I have no idea. Wayne, I haven't had the experience that you've had, and presumably people that are watching have had. So I really don't know. I mean, I love watching these TV shows. I know Jared busts my chops because I love watching them, but I love them because of the technology, not necessarily the subject matter. I'm intrigued, and, I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know.
Hey, fair enough, Tom. Michael, to you.
What was the question again?
I'll do what Tom said. I'll put "did" in front of it. So for the UFO connection, and you were already alluding to a lot of this earlier. Let's just say it like this: did ancient people interact with aliens or some kind of higher intelligence that passed on knowledge of building and technology? And somebody in chat who is at Kent kind of felt where I was going with this. The Book of Enoch, where the parts of the heavenly host were kicked out, and they brought down and taught humans warfare, how to, metallurgy and make weapons, and all of this stuff, science and yada yada. So, kind of off of those lines, what do you think?
It seems to reason more that we did have some intervention, not even just at one point, but at multiple points, rather than this sterile history that, people are talking about these days as, what's most accurate. I mean, truthfully, nothing comes out of nothing in a sense, right? Everything sort of builds on itself, compounds, technology is one thing and then it builds on itself, it becomes something else and so forth. And this is for anything. So how could we omit that same pattern of observance that we have now in our history? I think it would be foolhardy to do so. So when we do have all these examples of different recordings of these interactions or visits, or even in some cases human beings of that era being taken off and then brought back maybe for just a quick space ride. I mean, there's so many different bits of evidence that point to them having a lot of influence on the human culture as an entirety throughout history. Now, somebody might sit back and say, well, why would they do this? And it leads us to the theory that also is gaining quite a bit of traction, even in the scientific world, that we perhaps came from those extraterrestrials. They were 6 or 8 species. They are our parentage. So why wouldn't they want to come help us along to the point where, well, we're not going to just kill ourselves because we're dropped into something unfamiliar, or we have knowledge and now we can procreate. They may give us some guidance as parents would do, knowing that someday they had to let go of the hand, at least in the majority sense, because obviously we know that, we've been working with extraterrestrials here in the United States since at least the 40s, probably earlier on, probably about the 1920s when that contact really first started. So this is all behind the scenes. This is all behind closed doors. So we're not seeing that interaction for whatever reason. That's a direction that they've chosen to take. And I mean, I could come up with a lot of different reasons outside of, what I'm explaining now for that action. But suffice to say, I believe that they've always had interactions with us. I believe that, even within our recovered technology, we've sped up that knowledge and application of it tremendously over the last 100 years. And I mean, we could even go at a smaller fraction of that to really see where things went up logarithmically. And, this may have to do with the fact that probably about 90% of what we see in our sky in terms of UFO is ours. The other 10%, there may be another explanation for, and we could certainly meditate on that. But overall, we do have certain technology that is considered very clandestine, and it may be years before we know what it is. But the fact of the matter remains, as I've mentioned in other conversations, this technology that we've only thought was fantasy and science fiction is now being implemented in reality. So with that in mind, and the question you posed, I can't wait to see what tomorrow brings in respect to archaeology and the connection between our ancient civilizations and extraterrestrials.
Great points. And especially what advances in our technology is going to do. I just wanted to add that on to the end there. I can't wait to see where we go further with LiDAR, ground penetrating radar, all these kind of things. What are we going to be able to get up on a satellite within the next 10 years? Just there's going to be amazing things that are going to happen. They're going to blow everybody's mind. All right, Dennis, take us home, dude.
Okay. All right. We're going home. Well, anyway, I've been interested in this since the 60s when I read Eric von Daniken's first book. I think it was around 1968. 1974, we got a chance to meet Betty Hill. She actually came over to have a reading by Ethel Myers, who was brought to our site from New York City by Hans Holzer. He had been coming up for a couple of years. So she remained a friend of our family. So that kind of really lit the fires on UFOs, contact. And because they made a movie of that with 1975, The Interrupted Journey, and then we read the book and everything. But when you look at something like Gobekli Tepe, right after the Younger Dryas, something like that just seems to have fully blown the technology, the way they dressed the stones, quarried the stones, transported them, and set them up. And the beautiful artwork seems to have popped up. And before agriculture, they used to say that you couldn't really have much of a civilization until agriculture came along, kind of the reverse. And this seems to be reverse of that. My thought is maybe ancient, the ancient astronauts, if you will, kind of inspired people perhaps. Maybe there was contact as people claim today, which is very interesting. So I think there's possibility, if it's not like people ask, was our site built by aliens? Our site is pretty crude stone structures. The alignments are pretty amazing. The structures are pretty amazing too, but not cut with laser beams. We've been talking about that since the 70s. So that question has been around, since probably Eric von Daniken got that going, and some TV shows came out too. So, but inspiration, possibly, that's the thing I've always thought about, so I don't have a good answer, for that. But I think it's more of perhaps these ancient people saw these ancient, ancient aliens or were inspired by them, So that's my take on that, So that's my answer.
Good point.
Maybe.
and well, haven't they found? And I'll just present this out there and let whoever want to takes this one. Haven't they found petroglyphs that are kind of like gray? Look like little grays. Sketched on walls and like out in Nevada in the desert, or painted on.
Petroglyphs and petrographs, the paintings that had that too,
Yeah.
Brattleboro, Vermont, right on the Connecticut River. I just saw a photo. I was there in the 60s seeing the inscriptions, but they look like the ant people. If you look, they look like ant people with little antennas on them. And that's right in New England, right in Vermont, And as somebody, I just sent a brand new picture of that. I'm like, wow, look at that. I hadn't seen that for years, One other thing I was going to mention, though, is the Paracas skulls came up. And my friend Ellie Mazzulli is really big on the Nephilim, and he's going to come to our site next year for an excavation. But he's going to, it just came up that somebody's going to get and look at the DNA of the Paracas skulls, and apparently there's 30%. If I got the number wrong, I apologize. That is unknown DNA, and I don't know if that's the correct way to put that, but it came up on my phone on one of these smart news things, and I don't know how legitimate it was. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Maybe I should send this to LA and get his take on it. So there might be something in the work to look at the DNA of the Paracas skulls, because they're thinking again, maybe perhaps extraterrestrial. I think was in the comment, So
yeah.
Jared, I want to add in to one of, what was that, Tom?
No, I said, did you want to add on to that?
No, yes, one of the things I wanted to add on, and it was more because of what dovetailing into what Michael Roser said, is that we have these contemporary eyewitness accounts, of either UFO sightings like in the Bible, or the idea of those Roman armies about to fight and then stopping because of the stone sphere or the metal sphere falling. And then we have that battle that was lithographed over the 1500s. They had that lithograph of what looked like spaceships of battle. And so one of the things that may be true, which is we clearly had an advanced civilization on Earth. They could have been human. They could have been fine, alien or not. It's clear that whether it's humans and an alien group, or whether it's off-world humans and an alien group, or off-world humans and humans, the reality is that I think these eyewitness accounts of UFO activity, even back to the Middle Ages, seems to show that there's a group on this planet that do not get along with each other anymore. Clearly they did at one point. We had a global society, and now we don't. And it's concerning, I think, that when we start piecing our history back together, and whatever's underwater, whatever we're going to figure out, and whatever about this bio stuff, I think it's a problem when we have eyewitness accounts of advanced ships and all the Hindu stuff. There's all these records of the gods fighting, and the problem is, in my mind, is there's a reason they had a falling out, and is it altruistic on one side? Are they all bad? Did they cut off their nose to spite their face when they nuked the planet? How many times did they do it? So I do think when we say, did some of them come and help us? Yeah, I think there have been periods of times that, like Roser pointed out, there have been periods of times where clearly after some massive catastrophic event that we have almost a Peace Corps goodwill sort of situation, where it seems like, whether it's the stories of the Atlantean cities of very advanced people helping the guy with the suitcase that the ancient aliens guys like to talk about, the guy with the satchels that go back Tepe, and all the tepes, you got the symbols with the satchels, but you always got a dude, generally a white dude, generally a slight ginger, a little shifty, and he's going all over the earth Peace Corps-ing and helping and teaching alphabets and teaching math, and you have this same guy going around the planet. So were there ancient people, ancient UFO, advanced whatever humans, or both, helping various completely deprived of technology and of our past peoples develop past that. And then at the same time, but the classic idea that some spaceship came down and helped us move a megalithic block, that didn't happen. That's us. We did that. And we got to recover that. We have to figure out why. But why they're fighting and why they're still here and why they're around us and why we don't have any direct contact or why we're not worth it or whatever that is, there's some emotional processing we should do.
Yeah, good points. Well, everybody, we've been at this for about 2 hours and 20 minutes already. So I want to go ahead and get this wrapped up because Michelle and I got school tomorrow already. So we're back up at the crack of dawn, and hopefully you don't know anybody named Dawn. But any last minute comments or things coming up that you guys want to talk about? Let's go ahead. I'm going to start with Michael Roser.
Well, thank you very much, Wayne, and everybody here. This was a fantastic panel. I think we dove a little deeper into some of the subjects because of Wayne's consistent questioning and inquiry than I expected. And so that was a lot of fun. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, this was great, man.
I mean, I know you're good for it, but it's always good to, have that experience with you. So the next thing I'm working on outside of the documentary, with Montauk is a Salem Paraconvention. This is on, I can't remember the dates, but if you look up Salem Paracon, you will find us there. We're going to be out at the university again this year. We bring a fantastic crew along with us. It's a horror convention as well, so you have the opportunity to meet some of the actors of some of your favorite horror movies. And I'll be working with that. I'm probably getting back into the interviews as fall goes through with Dark Hour Paranormal. I've been very focused on what we do, with ArchaeoX and, the many other side projects that I've been working on. I'm working on 2 books right now, one co-authored by Brian Minnick of Montauk is Strange. I'm still behind the scenes with Third Phase of Moon a lot of times and just generally been keeping myself busy. But I know I haven't done enough interviews, so I'll be returning to that soon. But in the meantime, guys, keep tuning into this show. Subscribe and hit that like button because this is awesome.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. And when you do those interviews, don't forget, you got us here. We'll be happy to come on and bring our people along, and we'll have a great interview with you.
Sounds like a plan to me, mate.
All right, Dennis, what do you got going on coming up? And last minute comments.
Oh, it was an excellent show. Congratulations again on your 100th episode. That's wonderful. And I'm glad to be a part of it. And I was with you, I think, back in January, and I always enjoyed talking to you. Next time I'll be around when you come. Hopefully we can make the dates. And that brings up, we got an equinox coming up. Of course, we'll have a celebration. We'll be open all day for that. That's an amazing alignment with 3 different alignments in the morning, including an illumination in one of the chambers, which is ahead of that 2,550-foot serpent. October 9th, we have an event coming up, as you know, with Jared. He's coming out for, I guess, for a whole day. I guess he'll be out there for a couple of days, but we're looking forward to that. I think it's on he can correct me, I think it's on a Saturday, I think, but it's October
Saturday 19th of October for everyone listening.
That's it. Yeah, so we're really excited about that because winter solstice, and we're going to be doing an archaeological dig in May. We get that planned right now with my friend from out in LA, actually, Missouri, and we're just doing more research and more study of the site. But that's basically what we got going on right now.
Okay, and Tom, you got anything coming up? I think you do somewhere up in Michigan, I believe.
Yeah, we're doing a presentation. Myself and a colleague, Lon Krieger, are doing a presentation at the AAPS conference, the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society, first weekend in October. And then I'm going to host a bunch of people here at the house for Jared's discussion on the 19th and a tour at Dennis's site after that. And we've invited some very special guests, and hopefully they'll show up, and it'll be a fantastic day, or several days, actually.
Okay, awesome. And then last but not least, Jared.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us on, and happy 100th. And yes, Dennis will hopefully be around for usually I do a lecture. This will be my 3rd year, and I do an offsite lecture, usually 2-3 hours, and then we break for lunch, and then in the afternoon, we go to Stonehenge, and hopefully Dennis talks like even longer about everything. And we look around at that amazing and mysterious and interesting site. But Tom is hosting. I'm guessing you and Michael will probably be there.
Trying.
I just got to remember what those dates were for the Paracon.
What's your excuse, Michael?
I just have to look at what those dates are for the Paracon.
Whatever. Well, we got some other fun people coming, and you know, you can always catch us. I mean, if you're gone all those dates, I mean, depending on when Mike or when Wayne can come, you know, we're hoping to do some other curricular activities, as Tom pointed out, and maybe go hit some other ruins and stuff. And Dennis will have time. You'll have time to actually come join us and have a drink or something, right?
Absolutely. I'll put it right on my calendar right now. Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that. It sounds exciting.
All right.
All right, everybody. Well, again, gentlemen, thank you for joining me and Michelle tonight for our 100th episode. It is, it's really something, I guess. We really hit a milestone, I guess, considering that we started with episode 0, and it was 0 because if it bombed and it was horrible, there wouldn't have to be a number 1. It would just, that would be the end. 0. There never was anything that happened. But no, this has been great, guys, and it surpassed my expectations, honestly. I don't know, Michelle, what do you think?
Wayne's been talking about this for the last couple weeks, guys. You have no idea how excited he was to get the 4 of you on.
Especially after putting, you know, boots on the ground at, you know, America's Stonehenge, and just how much fun it was. And doing some field work. Absolutely love it. So
Wayne, don't forget the poll.
Oh, yeah. So just closing the poll, and I'll just have you guys here to listen to this. So it said, do you think that the builders of megalithic structures had an advanced technology to build them? Out of 38 votes, we had 82% said yes and 18% said no. So, you know, there it is. The crowd has spoken. But all right, gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and say see you later. Thank you very much. And it was great having you on.
Congratulations, Wayne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, guys.
Happy 100th.
Congrats, mate.
All right. All right, Michelle, what'd you think? The avatar that's staring at me in the screen.
I was gonna say, I was waiting for my avatar to come back. No, that was a great discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this
So
stuff.
between chat, the questions going on in chat, the discussion going on in chat, so the 5 of you getting a chance to bounce your ideas off of a variety of questions. I mean, again, when the issue of curriculum came up, there's just so much history. It's, the kids always ask, are we going to learn this? Are we going to learn that? More than likely, it's not in a history book or a social studies book or a science book.
Right.
So, I mean, I've always told my kids, I'm like, you're only going to get just a fraction of what you can actually learn. It's up to you to dig deeper.
Yep, exactly. All right, Michelle, I think it's that time.
Have a great night, everyone.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for joining the membership, right? You're got that eyes to the sky.
And
so
thank you to everyone in chat for hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. And just before we go, we got to thank Dorothy Hawkins for becoming a member again. Her $2 super chat, Rick Davis for the $10 super chat, and then Rich and his wife Fern Harrison becoming members. So awesome. Thank you, everybody. It's been incredible. So with that being said, have a great night, everybody.
And keep your eyes to that
sky. Is that it? Sky.
That is it.
All right. Where's the button to leave? There it is.